Hello, everyone. We are the Master Coaches of Career Triage HQ, and today we are doing a quick talk on code switching, the stress of being Black, brown, people of color in these professional and corporate spaces. And I want to start out with giving you some support from studies that have been done from two different articles. One is the American Psychological Association, APA.org, and they did an article titled Physiological and Psychological Impact of Racism and Discrimination for African Americans. Although the chronic condition of stress can have negative side effects on all people, the unique psychosocial and contextual factors, specifically the common and pervasive exposure to racism and discrimination, creates an additional daily stressor for African Americans. Often, African Americans do not realize daily stressors that may affect their psychological or physiological health, and so we have compiled a collection of articles and additional resources to understand the health effects that result from exposure and perception of racism and discrimination. And I would encourage you to go out there and Google that, because there is a lot of information on this topic. The other excerpt that I'd like to read to you is from Ms. Magazine on the deadly stress of being a Black woman in America. The adverse impact of living while Black under racism has been taking its toll on the health of Black Americans for generations. We have the highest incidence of hypertension and diabetes than any other group in America, except possibly Native Americans, also a highly oppressed group. And while all people of African descent live with the stress of racism, Black women face intersecting systems of oppression that include gender alongside race. And I wanted to share those with you because, as we know, we're in the midst of a reckoning of racism in this country, and it shows up, and deadly is not an exaggeration, as we have seen. And so we wanted to just also share with you how this shows up for people of color on a daily basis in ways that you may not even imagine, because it can show up in how we speak. It shows up in our names, the activities that we engage in. Hair is political for Black people. Hiring, fit is a code word that we have to deal with, and even being hired, and not even being able to congregate together. All of this connects to code switching, having to behave and perform one way in the corporate space, and then we have to go back to our neighborhoods, our families, our communities, and be Black again in our case. And what that looks like, what that means. So we're going to give our personal examples, and I'm going to start out with sharing this example from a housing perspective. Years ago, my then husband and I were selling a house, and it was sitting on the market. We would get some bites, but no offers. And finally, I asked the real estate agent, because I love Black art and my home is filled with it. And I said to her, do I need to take all of this Black art down? And she didn't want to say. This was a white female. She did not want to tell me that. And she just said, well, you can make it a little more neutral. I got the message. I took down all of our Black art, all of our photographs, anything that somebody would think, oh, Black people live here. And that house sold quickly. That's an example of how we have to switch between worlds, switch the code of what's acceptable and who we really are. And the who am I is the work that we do in career triage, in helping people find work that they love. For us, it's not just about a good resume, networking, which those things are important and we address those, but we start with the inner lens. We start with you connecting to your who am I? And this is why it is so important, because we truly believe that if you can't be who you are, where you are, then that is stressful for everybody. But if you lay some Black on top of that, it's even more stressful. Gwen, do you want to share?
Sure. Hi, everyone. One example that I'll share is looking for a job. I graduated from Troy State University. It is now Troy University. I graduated with a bachelor's degree in finance. Had great experience. I know that I had the skills to be able to work in the banking industry or another financial institution and be successful and help bring purpose and a wonderful vision, bring goals and all of those wonderful things to life for an organization. So I received a call from South Trust Bank. Someone had told them about me, and they wanted to talk to me. It was one of my professors, actually, who said, "Yeah, you need to talk to this young lady." So I was really excited because I really believed at that point in time that I wanted to be in that industry. So got an interview with them. They talked to me over the phone. It went very, very so well, in fact, that I had another phone interview. It was with a vice president of the organization, someone the second in command. And I had a phone conversation. The phone conversation lasted for a really long time. It was really, really great. And so he wanted to meet me in person. We didn't have videos like we do today, so it was simply a phone conversation. So I go to Montgomery, and I'm really excited. And I go in to meet this gentleman. And I walked in, and the receptionist looked at me as if to say, "And what are you doing here?" It was very immediate to me. So she asked me, "Can I help you?" I told her I had an appointment to see this gentleman. She looked at me, kind of shook her head a little bit and said, I don't think so. Who are you?" And I told her my name. She went to the back to where this gentleman obviously was. And in about 2 minutes, she comes back out. He comes storming out. He is red-faced, and he is yelling at me, telling me that we don't have any positions here. We don't have any positions here. No hello, nothing. We don't have any positions here. Do you hear me? Just very belligerent, very belligerent. And I knew then really what it was. They weren't expecting me to look the way that I did. And when I talked to Dr. Pyburn, who was my finance instructor, who had really wanted me to interview with this organization, he kind of nodded his head, and he basically said it because of your color, and I hate to say that. And so it's the idea that I was good enough on the phone when you didn't see me. So there was something in my voice that said to them, wow, this is a very highly intelligent and articulate white person. And when I showed up and I tore down their belief, they couldn't handle it. And that's how it was handled, very, very poorly, but yet who they were at that point in time. So this idea of how I sound, I've been told before, oh, you don't sound like a Black person.
Oh, yeah.
What does a Black person sound like?
Oh, yeah.
What does that mean?
Yes.
And so there is this idea in the white community that Black people or people of color have a certain dialect, and that you can tell them apart from their dialect. And I squashed all of that belief. And so, when you talk about code switching, Renee, well, there is this belief that, she sounds white, so therefore she sounds bright. She
Yes.
sounds as if
Yes.
this is who we need, but it's when showing up is something different. And that's one of the reasons why I really like the show The Voice, because people come out as they are and they have their chairs turned in the back. And so you are selecting someone by their gift. You don't see them until you hit the button because you really love their talent and what they can bring to the table. And then you turn around and oftentimes they're like, wow. But it's that type of being able to be valued for who I am and what I bring to the table and not the color of my skin. And yet I have through my life had to determine whether or not my voice has saved me. Unfortunately, it brings back memories that are hurtful and that are real. And it's just always a reminder that the color of my skin is going to determine my trajectory in my life, and that how I sound when I'm not seen, I'm accepted. When I'm seen, oh, wow, you're so articulate, because Black people can't speak proper grammar. And I'm sure that you all have stories as well.
Yeah, Tanya and I both have articulate stories. But the other thing with the stress of that is in our own communities. So yes, we have the stress of the white gaze of approval, but then we also have the stress of being in between. You know, you can be in between two worlds.
And speaking of the stress, you know, for me, it's the fitting in or the fit. And being in recruitment and placement of people, fit was code to me. We tried to cover it as a motivational fit, to fit in, you know, to fit with the team. But I quickly learned that was code. And so part of that stress is, you know, I question, am I really trying to fit in, or am I just trying to keep my job?
Yeah.
There were several situations that, you know, I was in. I can just remember when I first started out, I worked at a placement, a temp agency, and I had a new account. It was the largest account we had. And I had brought in all these new temps to place. And in our system, we had all of these descriptors. FOA, which was front office appearance. And it was like all these codes were in here. Well, I quickly learned what those codes meant. Well, I had a counterpart at a branch location who had never met me, and I had only been on this job maybe 30 days max. And she called because she needed one of my temps. And she starts asking me, she's reading all of the descriptors in the system, and she says, I see she's FOA, I see she's XYZ, and then her eyes blue or green. And so it just kind of stopped me for a minute, and I said, I'm sorry, that is not in our system. I've talked to 40 people. I don't know what color her eyes were. It didn't register with me initially. She came back and asked again, I need to know if her eyes are green or blue. And I said, well, what does that matter? Well, then it hit me. Oh my goodness, this is what she's talking about. So ended up getting her off the phone because she, I think, knew at that point she's on to me. So I go into the system to see if she's mapping this person to the account, and there are explicit instructions on this particular account for this company that they only wanted a certain type of employee, which meant not a Black. So I'm under this pressure now. I'm new on this job. I'm hot about this because it's wrong. You know, how do I play this out where, you know, I've got to now go talk about this because it's just not in me not to confront this. But it's a delicate place because you don't know if you're going to have your job after this. And so I do go tell a district vice president about how I was just furious about it. And that I couldn't believe, and this was 25, 26 years ago, that I was facing this. And it just showed me then that, okay, I've got to decide with all of this pressure on me, never mind, I got bills to pay. I have all the other pressures of the world going on. I've got to deal with this race thing.
Yeah.
So, I have this conversation, and it was a great moment for this person to choose to do right or to ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
I was supported in that, and she did not ignore it. But the person at the branch who asked the question, she could never look me in the face.
Mm-hmm.
And that then became a fit issue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So then I began to think, am I the problem? Because we can easily become the problem when we confront things.
That's exactly right.
And so you've got to manage that and decide, am I going to switch in this situation
Yes.
to support my job and my employer?
Yes.
Or am I going to stand in my truth?
Yes.
Confront the issue? It is very stressful.
It
And
is so stressful.
so many encounters, in particular being in HR with those types of situations.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We could go on and on and on. And so, our backgrounds, we have backgrounds in recruiting, organizational development, learning and development. If we had not been in our positions, because white people get to operate in isolated incompetence. And what I mean by that is, if a white person messes up in a position on a job and they are terminated, that's that person. Yeah. We have the stress, and some things still are true in these corporate spaces, that you are representing the race. My parents told us that, what you do represents this family and the race. If you mess up, you messing up for your people, because if you mess up, they might not give somebody else another chance. The fact that we were able to make it into positions of some decision-making authority, and we know that we brought people into the company that would not have been given the opportunity. And that's why it is so critically necessary for those of you who are in decision-making positions to be intentional. And it's not about a token, being the only one. This is another conversation that we had, how often we are in spaces where we are one or one of a few. Mm-hmm. That's another layer of stress.
Yes.
And while we're making you comfortable, you're not even cognizant of our level of comfort.
And I tell you about that whole comfort thing. I was in a situation where I was being invited to, outside of work, go into these social circles, and I would be the only Black person all the time. And we are still in situations where we are the only Black person in 2020 in some of these situations or circles. And all of the team buildings would be doing things that were not in my part of town, not necessarily something that I wanted to spend my afternoon, evening, or Saturday doing, and not necessarily with the people that I would choose to be.
Absolutely.
So you're having to suit up in some way and become, that person or that part of you. As my child would say when they were growing up, work mommy, because she was different than home mommy.
Mm-hmm.
Put
on the mask.
Put on the mask, and we go over to, everything that you want to do or that you feel comfortable doing in a white setting or a white circle, with no thought of how uncomfortable I am as a Black person and being the only Black person. So my grandmother had an antidote to this, because it bothered me so, and it was taking up a lot of time and energy. So I asked her, I said, I called her Mama. Mama, what would you do in this situation? She said, I have something for that. She said, you start planning the team building. You start inviting. And the first event you invite them to is the Magic City Classic.
And for those who don't know, the Magic City Classic is a huge event in Birmingham, Alabama, and it's 2 Black colleges that come together every fall, and it's massive.
All Black culture everywhere you look,
Yeah.
and it's thousands of people.
Yes.
I call it the Iron Bowl of HBC.
Right, yeah.
It's like the event. And I
Yeah.
tried it. I invited, at the time it was my manager, I invited her to the Magic City Classic. Well, everything kept coming up on her calendar for that particular Saturday. So of course she never went to the event, but it stopped her from inviting me to events that were exclusively in one part of town or where I was the only Black person. We never had a deep conversation about it, but I knew she got the message.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, you're having to really, that's a stressful situation to be in. You're balancing that with, you know, is she going to take it in the wrong way? Will I lose my job over this or never get promoted again? Because those are real punishments that happen.
The fact that I had to explain what the Magic City Classic was, because if we said Iron Bowl, there might be one person who doesn't know what the Iron Bowl is, but I doubt it. That's another layer of stress, is that we have to know everything that happens in the white world, what they deem important, what they like to do, all of that. That never occurs to a lot of white people to have to know about our world. Now, you know about Beyonce, you know about Oprah, but the granular things that go on in our world that are huge to us, a lot of white people don't know about it because you don't have to.
One of the things I was going to just tag on to what Tanya was talking about, being part of, being invited into your world. When I was at JCPenney, there was a young lady there, never forget her name was Stephanie. She was our security manager. And we got along really well. You know, she took a liking to me. I had transferred to that store, got along really well. You know, seemed like a really cool girl. But this one particular night, we were both closing. I was closing. And she said, Gwen, I want you to come with me to a pool hall. So she would go to a pool hall. She was a big pool person. And I told her, I said, Stephanie, I don't do pool. So I'm not. And she goes, no, you know, it's more than that. You know, it's just a really cool atmosphere. You know, they got good drinks and you could go and just, you know, it's just a really, really cool atmosphere. I said, I'm just not feeling it. And then she says to me, well, I really want you to think about it. Now, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, they don't accept Black people there. You know, they don't like them. But because you're going to be with me, you'll be okay. They'll let you in. And I looked at her and I said, are you a damn fool? I am not going there. Did you just hear what you said? And so it just went over her head because she was being the good white person and saying that I got you. And even though your kind is not accepted because you're with me, I'll save you. You can take me to a place that you know is unsafe or where I'm not wanted, and that I'm going to be okay because I'm with you. It just really floored me, the audacity, but more than the audacity, the ignorance, not getting it, not understanding, not stepping in my shoes, not seeing how that sounded.
Arrogance. It's a form of arrogance too,
and
to think that we should be grateful for that.
And so that's the side. That's one of the sides. That's one of the stories that bubbled up for me, is remembering that. As long as you're with me, you're good. You'll be good. As long as you stick with me, don't worry about your skin color. They'll look right past that.
Yeah. We want to end with solutions to this. And one of the things that we would say, for those of you who are in decision-making spaces in these companies, you have to be intentional. And diversity, that's in inclusion, those D&I, that's been floating around for years and years. And now we are at a true reckoning of what that really means on all levels. So yes, monuments are being torn down and buildings are being renamed. We believe in the power of messaging, and those things are important. And it's also important because racism is systemic. It's built into the ether of this country and all the entities. that you have to be really intentional about who you bring into a company. I was listening to Jon Stewart the other night talking about The Daily Show and when he was there, and he's saying that even when they tried to be more intentional about bringing in diverse comedians, diverse voices, he said we would do blind hiring. So we would remove all, you wouldn't know if it was a male, female, black. He said, and we thought that would help. He said it helped a little. He said, but it didn't help a lot. You know why? Because who do you recommend? You recommend people that look like you. So, you have to really up the ante. And it's not, I know a lot of times people like to point to, well, we have our one, we have our two. We are not a monolith. Black people on the continuum. And you need all of the complexity of melanin in your company. That has been proven to improve your bottom line. Is not just a nice to do. And so you have to be intentional to expand the opportunity for people who are different based on race, gender, even the word race. We talked about this. When you hear the word race, what do you think? You think of Black and brown people, right? You don't think of white people. You just exist. You just are. So, it really does require an intentional focus on seeing people in who they are and expanding the makeup of a company. And we also talked about where we tend to congregate Black people, right? Where is the diversity in your company? Mm-hmm. All of these things have to be looked at and have to be addressed in a very intentional and in difficult way. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be uncomfortable. Listen, we live with being uncomfortable every day. Mm-hmm. That's why we're having this conversation. And it's time for everybody to be uncomfortable now so that real change can happen. So any final thing that you want to say, we would encourage you to, if you want to ask us any questions about this or anything else, this is the time to really make a difference. And we want to do our part. Gwen, Tanya, anything else you want to say?
I'm just speaking from the perspective of, yes, diversity, yes, inclusion, but I think the other missing link is engagement. Mm-hmm. And you're talking about that. It's the true engagement, and it requires you to be uncomfortable if you are not accustomed to interacting at a true committed level of interaction. And so I did invite a friend to go to the Magic City Classic because she was interested. And, that to me was a willingness to step outside of her comfort zone. I went to her cookie swap at her house, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. and she came to the Classic mm-hmm. with me. And so really it's the level of engagement. And I think that's when people become more human. And that's when the level of respect is increased. And that's what we're asking for. And so it's a different landscape now. And there's no neutral part of this conversation.
Right.
Either you are supporting the cause to open up the perspective, the dialogue, and the engagement with people who are different from you.
Absolutely.
That makes you, anti-racist, or you're racist. There's no in between. And right, that is the perspective that has to be recognized, and we have to engage in conversations, true conversations. We have to engage in the decision making. And coming from that employment perspective, we have to look at how we onboard people into companies. That whole fit discussion needs to happen. What do you mean fit? What world are you requiring people to fit in? And that, to me, I think would help shape the dynamics. And I really think overall would make most companies more productive. And so it's now putting your money where your mouth is, put up or shut up, because a change has to happen. And I do believe that this generation will fight for it.
We cannot get complacent. We cannot stop. We have to keep, it's not a coincidence to me that a lot of this blew up because of a man's foot on another human being's neck. Mm-hmm. And we have got to keep our foot on the neck of systemic racism.
Absolutely.
Reach out to us at careertriagehq.com for any additional questions or conversation about this topic. And we thank you for your attention.